The banker's voice was a polite whisper, but the words hit me like a wrecking ball. The account shows your mortgage payment on the estate is over a month past due. Ma'am, my heart stopped. I'd paid it weeks ago. My eyes darted to Michael, my husband, who was carefully polishing a glass on the mantel. He didn't look up, but in the reflection, I saw his eyes, cold, empty, a flicker of triumph. That was the moment I realized the man I'd trusted with my heart was trying to steal my home. Before we dive into today's story, take a moment to share where you're watching from. We love seeing how our stories bring people together from every corner of the world. Your thoughts and comments are what make this community so special, and we're truly grateful to have you here. If you haven't already, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a new story filled with drama, resilience, and unexpected twists. Now, settle in, get comfortable, and maybe grab your favorite drink because this is a tale you won't want to miss. Let's get started. I am Sarah, a 40-year-old interior designer, a career I meticulously built with my own hands after inheriting a sprawling million-dollar estate and a classic New England mansion from my late mother. The house was not just property. It was a living, breathing scrapbook of my life, a sanctuary where I'd learned to walk on cool marble floors, to draw my first hesitant sketches in a sun-drenched alcove, and to dream under the watchful gaze of ancestral portraits. My mother, a woman of impeccable taste, had a keen eye for art and design. She had curated every piece, from the hand-carved Italian credenza in the dining room to the delicate impressionist paintings that line the grand staircase. I had carried on her legacy, pouring my soul into every renovation, every fabric choice, every detail of the mansion and the surrounding botanical-grade gardens. The estate was my masterpiece, a testament to my past, and a canvas for my future. Michael, my husband of 2 years, was a personal trainer with the physique of a Greek god and the ambition of a venture capitalist, though his portfolio was conspicuously empty. We met at a charity gala I had helped design. He was charming, attentive, and seemed genuinely fascinated by my work. He spoke of stocks and startups, always with a grand, world-conquering vision that never seemed to materialize into anything tangible. But he had an uncanny knack for making me feel seen, for praising the nuance in my work, for talking about our future as if we were a formidable team building a new empire together. He seemed to love the house almost as much as I did, proudly leading tours for his friends, his voice booming with ownership as he pointed out the improvements we're planning. I was so consumed by the intoxicating cocktail of his charm and my own quiet loneliness that I never saw the small, subtle shifts in his behavior, the way his eyes would linger on a valuation document, the slight possessiveness in his tone when he referred to our home. I was too busy living the life I thought was perfect to notice the poison seeping into the foundations. The first crack in my perfect world was a phone call from the bank on a crisp Tuesday morning. I was in my studio, sketching a design for a client's library, when my phone buzzed. "Ms. Covington," the representative said, her voice a calm, professional monotone. "I'm calling from Essex County Bank regarding the mortgage on your property. Your payment is now 30 days past due." I laughed, a short, incredulous sound. "I'm sorry. There must be a mistake. I personally process that payment on the first of every month via an automated transfer. I can send you the confirmation." There was a pause, the clicking of a keyboard. "I see the automated schedule, Ms. Covington, but it was manually suspended last month. We received a request to temporarily halt the payments to reevaluate the finances of the estate. The request came from someone on your account, a Mr. Michael Vance." The pencil slipped from my fingers, leaving a gray scar across my sketch. The room suddenly felt cold, the air thin. "Michael," I whispered, my own voice a stranger's. Yes, ma'am, she continued, oblivious to the chasm opening beneath me. He stated he was taking over financial management. We will need to collect the past due amount plus late fees to avoid foreclosure proceedings. Foreclosure. The word was an obscenity in the context of my mother's house. It was a matter of pride, a sacred duty to maintain it flawlessly. I felt a cold, hard knot form in my stomach as I managed a strangled thank you and hung up. My heart hammered against my ribs, a panicked, desperate rhythm that made my hands tremble. I walked on unsteady legs into the grand living room, where Michael was admiring himself in the gilt-edged antique mirror above the fireplace, his muscles flexing under a tight-fitting shirt as he checked his reflection. Michael, I said, my voice barely a whisper. The bank just called. They said you stopped the mortgage payments. What did you do? He didn't turn around, continuing to study his profile. His face, reflected in the mirror, was a mask of cold calculation. The warmth he usually radiated was gone, replaced by something flat and reptilian. There was no remorse, not even surprise, just a flicker of something sharp and triumphant in his eyes before it was veiled. He had started his game. And the terrifying truth was I had been a player without even knowing it. A few nights later, the game intensified. The air in the house had been thick with my unspoken questions and his saccharine reassurances. He dismissed the bank call as a simple misunderstanding, a strategic move he was making to renegotiate our interest rate. He made me feel foolish for questioning him. Then came the evening he laid the trap. He came home with a thick manila folder clutched to his chest, his face a mask of false, solemn seriousness. He set it on the mahogany dining table, the same table where my mother had taught me to sketch, its polished surface reflecting the grim set of his jaw. Sarah, he began, his voice taking on a rehearsed, almost corporate tone that chilled me to the bone. We need to talk about our future, about protecting what we have. I already knew this was the next move in his campaign. I had been bracing for it since the phone call. I simply sat opposite him, my hands folded in my lap, and waited. He launched into a polished, persuasive monologue about protecting our assets from frivolous lawsuits, about optimizing our taxes, about how this was the only way to safeguard our $1 million estate for our children. We didn't have children. He was using words that sounded important, peppering his speech with terms like asset protection and fiduciary duty. But the feeling behind them was pure, predatory manipulation. I watched his face, noting every forced gesture, every overly dramatic pause for effect. I've had my legal team draw up the papers, he continued, sliding the heavy folder across the table. It landed with a soft, final thud. I need you to sign these. My love, it's a formality, really, just to transfer the deed to a family trust. It protects the house. It protects us. The pen he offered felt like it weighed 100 pounds. His gaze was fixed on me, a predatory hunger lurking behind his practiced, concerned smile. This is a sign of our love, Sarah, he insisted, his voice dropping to a low, honeyed whisper that was meant to be intimate, but felt like a threat, a commitment, a true partnership. If you can't trust me with this, if you need to call lawyers and drag this out, then what do we even have? He was a master, turning my hesitation into a moral failing, my prudence into a personal attack on him and our marriage. I looked at the papers, at the dense blocks of text I couldn't possibly understand, at the blank lines waiting for my signature like open graves. My gut, my mother's voice in my head, screamed at me to run, to throw the papers in his face and call him the snake he was. But I also saw the flicker of something hard in his eyes. This was not a negotiation, it was a test. And if I failed, his performance would shatter, and the rage I suspected lay beneath would emerge. I knew, with a sudden, gut-wrenching certainty, that I had to play the long game. I took a deep breath, met his intense gaze, and picked up the pen. Of course, Michael and for us, I said, my voice steady despite the tremor in my soul. I signed where he indicated, my signature feeling like a forgery of myself. I signed not because I believed him, but because I knew this was only the opening act of his plan, and I was going to be ready for the finale. Just a few days after I signed the papers, as the first wave of buyer's remorse and terror washed over me, a strange text message appeared on my phone. It was from an unknown number. "Be careful," it read. "Michael has done this before. He targets women with assets. Don't let him ruin you like he ruined me." My blood ran cold. The message was vague, an anonymous cry from the past, but it was the external validation my screaming intuition needed. It confirmed my deepest fears. I deleted it immediately, my heart pounding a frantic tattoo against my ribs. But the seed of doubt had now grown into a certainty. I decided to stop questioning myself and start observing him. The following week, Michael invited my younger brother, Liam, over for a backyard barbecue. It was a transparent attempt to isolate me from my own family. Michael was in his element, flipping steaks on the grill, laughing loudly, trying to charm Liam with talk of investments and sports. "Sarah's a brilliant artist," Michael said, draping a heavy arm around my shoulders, his touch feeling like a brand. "But she's not so great with the financial side of things. It's a good thing I'm here to handle the business. You know, she gets overwhelmed with all the numbers and legal jargon." Liam, bless his loyal heart, just nodded politely. But I saw the flicker of confusion in his eyes. He knew how meticulous I was, how I'd single-handedly managed every complex detail of our mother's estate since she passed. Michael was attempting to sow division, to paint me as an incompetent, flighty artist in my own family's eyes. It was a new, sickening level of his game. My resolve hardened into something sharp and cold. I remembered a conversation from years ago. My mother talking about her close friend, a renowned architect named Robert who had helped her with the mansion's original garden blueprints. I found his number in my mother's old address book and called him, pretending to have a question about the drainage system in the rose garden. "Of course, Sarah," he said, his voice warm and familiar, a balm to my frayed nerves. "You know, your mother and I spent countless hours on that project. I'll never forget how particular she was about the layout of the koi pond. She even had me design a secret compartment in the blueprint storage tube, a false bottom where she kept the original deed to the property and her personal journal. Just in case," she'd say. She was always so protective of her legacy. I hung up, my mind racing. A secret compartment, a journal. I went to the guest bathroom, locked the door, and took a deep, shuddering breath. I pulled out a burner phone I had purchased that afternoon and called Elizabeth, a top litigator and my mother's fiercest friend. "He has me signing papers, Elizabeth. He's changing things," I whispered. "I expected as much," she said, her voice a blade of steel. "Don't fight him, not yet. Let him think he's winning. Document everything, every receipt, every conversation, every time he moves a piece of furniture. Become a historian of your own life." Later that week, I called her again. "He changed the locks on the studio." "Perfect," she said. "We'll get a locksmith to give us a sworn report on the unauthorized change. Just document everything. Sarah, every text, every word, every ridiculous, arrogant move he makes. Let him build our case for us." I became a ghost in my own house. I moved with quiet purpose, my grief and fear channeled into a cold, meticulous focus. I found the blueprint tube in the attic, my fingers trembling as I located the false bottom Robert had described. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth, were the original deed and my mother's journal. It was a heartbreaking, empowering read. She wrote about her own struggles in her first marriage with a man who had tried to manipulate her financially, how she had to fight tooth and nail to protect her assets. The words were a roadmap, a blueprint for survival. "Trust your gut, my dear," she had written in her elegant script. "Men like this count on your politeness, on your desire to keep the peace. Don't give it to them. And never, ever underestimate the power of documentation." The journal was a lifeline, a guide from beyond the grave. Tucked into the back cover was a crumpled, forgotten piece of paper that made my breath catch a bank statement of Michael's from 3 years ago, showing a crushing amount of debt and a liquidated investment account. He wasn't a visionary. He was a desperate con artist. With Elizabeth's guidance, I had discreet, high-resolution cameras installed in the main rooms, hidden in smoke detectors and books. The footage they captured was sickening. I watched him trying on my mother's jewelry in front of a mirror, a sick, predatory gleam in his eyes as he held a diamond necklace to his throat, thinking he was alone and unobserved. His behavior grew bolder. He began swaggering around the mansion, ordering me to clear out some of this old junk, treating me like a guest in the home that was legally and spiritually mine. He had no idea I was quietly building a fortress of evidence against him, that his every move was being logged, every word being recorded. He was putting on a performance for an audience of one, and I was that audience, patiently waiting for the finale. He even staged a fake robbery, calling the police in a panic, claiming that some of my mother's more valuable sculptures had gone missing. "I don't know who would do such a thing," he cried, shaking his head with a feigned, theatrical sadness. But my cameras had captured him the night before, carefully wrapping the sculptures in blankets, placing them in his car, and driving away. His incompetence was becoming my greatest weapon. One sun-drenched afternoon, I was scrolling through my phone when a new post from his Instagram account appeared. It was a picture of him on the main balcony, the one overlooking the gardens my mother had designed. He held a glass of expensive champagne, a smug, triumphant smile plastered on his face as he stared out at his new kingdom. He had captioned it, "Finally, it's mine, starting a new chapter. Legacy, Yasat, king of the castle." A wave of pure, unadulterated rage washed over me, so potent it left me breathless. He wasn't just trying to take my house, he was broadcasting his victory to the world. He was gloating, bragging about his betrayal, unaware that every boast was another nail in his coffin. I took a screenshot and sent it to Elizabeth without a word. Her reply was swift and simple. "Perfect. Now, let's set the stage for the show." The climax of his pathetic tragedy arrived in the form of a meticulously planned family dinner. Michael had invited all of our close family members and a few of his own friends' men, who looked at him with a mixture of envy and admiration. The guise was our anniversary. The house was filled with a nervous, electric tension and the suffocating perfume of forced smiles. Michael, in a crisp, tailored suit, was beaming, playing the magnanimous host. He had replaced my mother's subtle floral arrangements with ostentatious displays of red roses, a garish touch that felt like a personal violation. "Yaha," after dinner. He clinked his glass to get everyone's attention. "My friends, my family," he began, his voice loud and clear, resonating with false sincerity. "I have an announcement. You all know that I have been a devoted husband and a tireless partner to Sarah. She is the artist, the soul of this home. But a home is also a business, an asset, and I have worked tirelessly to secure our future. So today, I can finally announce that I have successfully taken over the management and ownership of this estate. The deed is now in my name, under a trust that I control. We are finally a real team, secure and strong. He raised his glass to me, a cruel, possessive smirk on his face, as if daring me to protest. Just then, as a confused murmur rippled through my family, the grand front door opened. Elizabeth walked in, her heels clicking against the marble floor with the resolute sound of a judge's gavel. The room fell silent. She was dressed in a sleek, powerful suit, and she carried a manila folder, the same kind Michael had used to deceive me. She walked straight up to him, her face impassive, and placed the folder on the table. Michael's triumphant red face drained to a horrified pasty white. "I'm sorry to interrupt your celebration, Michael," she said, her voice calm, professional, and lethally sharp. "But I think we need to review a few things. You see, the papers that Sarah signed are completely void. They were signed under duress and are legally worthless. And these," she said, tapping the folder, "are the real documents, the original deed, financial records showing Sarah's meticulous management, and, most interestingly, evidence." Michael stammered, his eyes darting from Elizabeth to me, searching for an escape. I I don't know what you're talking about," he said, his voice a panicked squeak. "This is a joke. I have lawyers. The best lawyers." On cue, one of the men Michael had invited, a slick corporate attorney named Mr. Davies, stepped forward, his face grim. "Michael," the man said, his voice grave and devoid of any previous warmth, "we cannot represent you. Elizabeth just forwarded us the preliminary evidence file. All of this, the recorded conversations where you admit your intent, the video of you removing art you later reported stolen, the fraudulent documents it shows you have been engaging in serious, premeditated fraud. This is not a divorce case anymore. This is a criminal case. You're facing grand larceny and wire fraud charges." The room erupted into chaos. Michael's friends backed away from him, their faces a mixture of shock and disgust, not at his actions, but at his failure. My family, led by Liam, moved to my side, a protective wall. Michael was cornered, exposed under the bright light of the chandelier he had so admired. He had nothing left. He was a fraud, and everyone in his world knew it. The party ended abruptly, a shipwreck of canapes and shattered egos. I stood in the grand doorway, watching Michael leave, a defeated man clutching a single suitcase that held his entire, pathetic life. He had no words, no apologies, no last-ditch explanations. He just left, his face a mask of shame and utter defeat, disappearing into the night that had once been his to command. I didn't say anything. There was nothing left to say. He had chosen his path, and now he was walking it alone. I walked back into the house, which felt so much bigger, lighter, and more peaceful now. I looked at the empty spaces on the pedestals where my mother's sculptures used to be. The house had been my sanctuary. It had been violated, but it had not been conquered. I had won it back. The next day, a locksmith changed every lock. The sound of the tumblers clicking into place, a symphony of security and new beginnings. I took back my wedding ring, a beautiful diamond that now felt like a cold piece of glass, and the keys to my house. I began a new life, a life of quiet power and profound purpose. I decided to start a foundation in my mother's name, the Eleanor Covington Foundation for Women's Independence. I would use my wealth and my experience to help women who were in situations like mine, who were facing financial abuse and psychological manipulation, to give them the resources to fight back. I had learned a hard, brutal lesson about trust and betrayal, but I had come out on the other side, not broken, but forged in fire. My home was no longer just a legacy of the past. It was a symbol of my strength, my resilience, my future. I had not given up, I had not backed down, and I had not let a greedy man's ambition destroy my spirit. I had won back my freedom, my dignity, and my peace, and I had done it all without wasting a single word of explanation on the man who was no longer worth the breath. In every story of betrayal, there is a moment when the illusion shatters, leaving us to face a painful truth. But it's in that quiet devastation that we discover a deep, unyielding strength we never knew we had. This journey reminds us that true ownership is not about a deed or a title, but about possessing your own truth and having the courage to reclaim what is rightfully yours. The most profound victories are often won without a single word, through the quiet, determined power of resolve. A broken trust can become the very foundation for a renewed sense of purpose. Because when someone tries to take everything from you, you learn what truly belongs to you: your dignity, your peace, and your freedom. Thank you for watching this powerful story. If this message of resilience resonated with you, please hit that like button. We'd love to hear your thoughts and insights in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss our next story of overcoming the impossible. Until next time, stay strong, stay true,